What if there was a country so vast, so geographically gifted, and so rich in natural resources that it should be a global superpower, but somehow it isn't? A place that covers nearly half a continent, spans multiple time zones, holds nearly half of South America's population, touches nearly every country around it, and yet remains a story of untapped potential. This is Brazil. Start by picturing a country larger than the entire contiguous United States. Over 8.5 million square kilometers of rivers, forests, mountains, beaches, wetlands, and farmland. And it's all in Brazil, fifth largest country on Earth by area. This country alone covers 47% of South America, and its geographic reach touches all but two countries on the continent, Chile and Ecuador. That's because towering mountain ranges like the Andes physically separate them from Brazil, forming a natural barrier. And yet, despite its incredible position and size, Brazil hasn't quite arrived at the global table in the way countries like the US, China, or even India have. The puzzle here is not just in economics or politics, it's in the geography. Brazil's land is massive, but it's also shockingly flat. Unlike its Andean neighbors, there are no snow-capped mountain backdrops. Brazil sits on an ancient, geologically stable plate. No violent tectonic activity, no earthquakes or volcanoes. Its highest peak, Pico da Neblina, barely scrapes 3,000 meters and was so remote that its status as the highest point wasn't confirmed until the 1960s. Most of the land is plateaus, highlands, and wide basins, making it ideal for agriculture and settlement, but also incredibly tricky when it comes to connecting distant regions. Without dramatic elevation changes, there are fewer natural barriers to human movement, but there are also fewer opportunities for hydro infrastructure like high-altitude dams that rely on drop and flow. That's why the rivers here are powerful, but often shallow and meandering. The Brazilian highlands, which dominate the central and eastern parts of the country, might look impressive on a map, but they rise gently rather than dramatically. They don't form walls, they form waves. This vast, undulating landscape lacks the sharp definition that countries with mountain chains often use to carve up territory, build natural defenses, or define climate zones. Instead, the terrain creates a kind of openness that's both an opportunity and a challenge. In the south, these highlands become fertile ground for farming and ranching, but in the interior north, they often blend into dense forests or remote grasslands that see little development. The flatness means roads and railways need to cover vast distances without the shortcut advantage of mountain passes or valleys. It's not a land that naturally funnels transportation or trade. It's a land that stretches and sprawls. And while that makes it easy to spread people out, it also makes it hard to bring them together. That's why many Brazilian cities developed independently with little integration until the modern era. When cities like São Paulo and Rio exploded in the 20th century, they didn't just grow, they pulled gravity toward themselves. Meanwhile, inland towns remained isolated, reachable only by long, winding roads. The cost of connecting Brazil's regions has always been high. That's part of the reason the interior still feels worlds apart from the coast. The land seems calm, but the silence of its geography masks logistical obstacles that few outsiders fully appreciate. Even basic services like freight logistics and broadband internet can take years longer to reach remote communities. And because of the terrain's uniformity, building dams, tunnels, and highways requires vast upfront investment with fewer natural supports. What looks like gentle terrain is, in reality, a silent gridlock. Geography that doesn't fight back, but doesn't help either. That's the paradox of Brazil's flatness. It promises access and simplicity, but delivers scale and sprawl. And distance is everything here. Think about this. The Amazon River basin alone is so massive that it drains nearly 40% of South America. It carries more water than the next 7 largest rivers on Earth combined. Every second, over 200,000 cubic meters of fresh water rush out into the Atlantic. That's enough to fill 83 Olympic-sized swimming pools every single second. The freshwater plume it creates is visible from space and covers over 1 million square kilometers of ocean. And yet, that enormous Amazon River, despite its power, doesn't serve Brazil's economic core. Why? Because the river flows north. and Brazil's development is centered in the south and southeast. Cities like São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Belo Horizonte, these are the country's beating economic hearts, and they're hundreds of kilometers away from the Amazon's main arteries. So while the river is powerful, it's not practical for transporting goods from where they're produced to where they need to go. The Amazon rainforest itself is another paradox. On one hand, it's the planet's largest rainforest. Just the portion that lies inside Brazil is about the size of Western Europe. It stores an incredible amount of carbon, contains 1 in 10 known species on Earth, and hides potentially life-saving pharmaceutical compounds in its dense foliage. But it's also incredibly hard to access. Infrastructure is minimal, roads are sparse, communities are scattered. And then there's the sensitive human reality. Over 100 uncontacted indigenous tribes are believed to still live within the Brazilian Amazon. The government's policy is to leave them untouched, a necessary protection from modern diseases that could be catastrophic to them. And those tribes, they're not just symbols of isolation. They're reminders of the immense cultural diversity that's still alive in Brazil. Brazil is often thought of as a coastal, urban country, and for good reason. Over 80% of the population lives within just 200 miles of the Atlantic Ocean. The interior? It's a different world entirely. The state of Amazonas, for example, is bigger than France, Spain, and Germany combined. But it only has about 4 million people. That's the same population as a medium-sized US city, spread out over a jungle the size of Western Europe. The disparity between coast and interior is stark. Coastal cities are buzzing, global, industrial, and hyper-modern. São Paulo, Brazil's largest city, is the biggest city in the entire southern hemisphere. With over 12 million people in the city proper and over 22 million in the metro area, it's a mega-city in every sense. An industrial giant, a cultural hub, a traffic nightmare, and a place with the largest population of Japanese descent outside of Japan. Yes, you heard that right. Over 1.5 million Japanese Brazilians call it home, a legacy that began in 1908 when shiploads of workers arrived to support the booming coffee economy. That migration shaped more than labor markets. It changed the cultural DNA of the city. Today, entire neighborhoods like Liberdade are covered in red torii gates, bustling Asian markets, and fusion eateries that blend sushi with Brazilian street food. It's one of many ways São Paulo reflects Brazil's unique blend of influences. The city is also home to large Italian, Lebanese, Portuguese, and West African communities, each adding layers to its culinary scene, art, music, and politics. But just a few hundred kilometers away, the story is drastically different. Travel inland and suddenly the pace slows. Infrastructure thins out. Population density drops. The roads narrow, the skyscrapers vanish, and communities become more isolated. This urban-rural divide isn't just economic, it's geographic. The coastal belt has always been Brazil's front door. That's where the Portuguese landed, where the ports were built, and where the exports flowed. Sugar, gold, coffee, rubber, it all left from the coast. So naturally, cities sprang up there. Over time, they became magnets for investment, talent, and governance. Meanwhile, the interior was left to its own devices. Development came slower, often funded by government incentives rather than market forces. For many families in the interior, a trip to São Paulo or Rio can feel like entering another country. The infrastructure gap is visible everywhere, from healthcare and education to public transport and basic utilities. While the coastal cities race into the 21st century, inland Brazil still struggles with 20th century challenges. Public services strain under the weight of rapid growth. Meanwhile, the interior continues to lose talent and youth, creating a cycle that's hard to break. It's a tale of two Brazils, one wired into the global economy, the other still waiting for connection. Meanwhile, inland Brazil is still catching up, slowly. That contrast is something Brazilian leaders have wrestled with for generations. In fact, they even built an entirely new capital, Brasilia, in the middle of the wilderness during the 1950s to try and force development inland. This wasn't just a new city, it was a symbol. Built from scratch, designed by famed architect Oscar Niemeyer, Brasilia was supposed to be a beacon of modernity that shifted power away from the coast. It was shaped like an airplane from above, with sleek, futuristic buildings and wide, grand boulevards. It's even a UNESCO World Heritage Site today. But while it helped bring administration to the interior, the economic engine of the country still roars by the sea. That economic engine is powerful. Brazil has the third largest amount of arable land in the world. It's a global agricultural titan, the top producer of coffee for over 150 years running. Also a top producer of soybeans, sugar, beef and orange juice. In many years it leads the world in exports for these. And yet the same issue keeps coming up. Infrastructure. The fields may be massive, the yields may be high, but if there aren't railways or reliable roads to get those goods to ports, they lose value fast. Much of Brazil's produce must travel vast distances by truck over often poorly maintained roads, leading to delays, spoilage, and higher costs. So even though Brazil could be dominating agricultural trade even more, it gets bogged down by its own geography. Now layer on something else, the Pantanal. Not as well known as the Amazon, but just as impressive in its own way. It's the world's largest tropical wetland, stretching across parts of Brazil, Bolivia, and Paraguay. But during the rainy season, over 80% of the region is underwater. When the water recedes in the dry season, animals are left stranded in isolated pools, creating one of the highest concentrations of wildlife on the planet. Jaguars, capybaras, giant otters, and hundreds of species of birds thrive here. If it wakes up, if it truly harnesses its geography, not just economically, but sustainably, it could become one of the most powerful and important countries on the planet. So the question isn't whether Brazil has the potential. That's been proven over and over again. The real question is, will Brazil finally wake up? If that journey through Brazil's geography got you thinking, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss a deep dive into the world's most fascinating places.